Hey guys, welcome to the MC Anime Podcast. We cover anime, geek culture, Japanese aesthetics, and Asian studies. We are a multi-fandom podcast, and you can expect to hear topics in your favorite hobby or fandom activity potentially. You can find MC Anime on Google Podcasts, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. Also, please check out mcanimepodcast.com, our website. Furthermore, stay tuned in for another episode.
Welcome to another episode of MC Anime. I'm MC Anime, and today I'm with my co-host again with Bia. How you doing today?
I'm doing great. It's been a very wild week. We're almost right back at the weekend, but I'm
Yeah.
excited to get into the deeper parts of today's topic. So, all things considered, very, very good.
True. And today's topic is Japanese duality, modesty, and anime. So this particular topic is diving into the culture of modesty and also the level of seriousness that Japan has, the level of conservation that they have for people, the image, how they look, all that stuff, and then also how they present it in anime, how that culture can be drawn from Japanese society, depicted into that medium.
Yes. And so this topic kind of came up from we've had many, many discussions in regards to different aspects of anime, different themes, motifs, even doing series that focus on one thing or another, or just talking about one show in particular. But I think it's always really cool to look at how genre of animation and storytelling can seem so similar, but also so different from the country it originated from.
Oh yeah, Japanese culture. I don't know. It's one of those things. That's like very nuanced things you have to be aware of. Like to go to Japan, if you're American, you want to excel at those things. That they are seem honoring the elderly, the society, the etiquette. All that has to be factored in for you not to stand out as you know, the American who's just an outsider not knowing Japanese customs.
Yeah. Um, like there's been more of a recent uptick in regards to foreigners who live in different countries, especially like countries like South Korea that are very popular because of their entertainment industry.
Yeah,
But beforehand, it was Japan, especially with the boom and more popularity growing around anime, and it's still growing now. But just seeing the cultural differences of how it is
yeah,
to be a Westerner in an Eastern country, and then you, if you even if you Google things I learned as a tourist or as a visitor in another country, there's
that's very
so many
true.
things, yeah, for etiquette wise, politeness, completely different.
Oh yeah, I remember seeing like videos of anime man just going all over Japanese society and yada yada yada. It's like okay, and then fun fact. I actually had interview earlier today. Uh, Japan on Film, which is another podcast that's going to be coming up. Um, it's a collaboration, but I don't want to spoil too much. But he originally moved from uh, the United States to Japan, married in Japan, and had a child. So he still had the film aesthetics that he brought with him, like teaching all that stuff. But he had to move and learn an entirely new culture while moving.
That's tough, and
Yeah,
it takes patience, but I think it also is it's gonna be very fun and exciting.
yeah.
Everything's new and kind of interesting.
Mhm.
Yeah. And I mean, if there's any reason to move, it would probably be for love or for family.
Oh yeah, I don't really see any other reason not to.
Yeah. Outside of maybe like I mean, even for work, I have a lot of military friends who have gone overseas and worked overseas, and for them, they've talked about like how things are different culturally, but also
Yeah.
for they also stay on base, so that's it's very much so different than living in like a province or in a residential area.
Okay, yeah. Uh, one particular term that is brought up a lot, Orientalism. It's basically uh it's basically Orientalism is the belief or the perception that you have of the country and the people of another country perceiving your country. This is a cultural exchange and also what you believe it could be. You know that you know what I mean?
Orientalism.
Yes. The term to describe something or someone from East Asia. Oriental has various
Uh
associations with European
I have
imperialism
never
and
what
tends to be related with a offensive stereotype.
yeah, I like for one, using the term Oriental for anyone of Eastern descent, no
Yeah.
one does that anymore. You're not. That's absolutely not what you're supposed to do, unless you're listening to like Avenue Q or something. But um, but
Yeah.
that's an interesting term. I've never heard that. It's pretty spot on. I'd have to say.
Well, yeah, because throughout history, people will view Asian countries through this lens, which Orientalism is not necessarily true. And also, this is also a reverse belief from like China, for example. They had a closed off system. They were isolated from the global empire. They had control of the trade. They were in demand, but it took a foreign power to weaken China to open up the borders. Same thing with Japan. They had an isolationistic country, and as a result, it took a long time for change.
Hmm.
So, Bushido Code being the big thing, the shogun versus the emperor, all of that leading up to, Imperial Japan. Now we have, instead of Imperial Japan, we have a democracy Japan. So it's totally have changed. They've been slow to change because they were not willing to accept the Western Hemisphere.
I mean, I think that's kind of weirdly enough a timeline that every country almost goes through. Like even the United
Yeah.
States, we had a time where we cut ourselves off from the world and shut down. It literally was like us being forced and thrust into World War I
Mhm.
and World War II. That was the reason why we had to get involved. But
Yeah.
we've
Well,
done the same thing with
yeah.
isolationism.
Well, you can also say the same thing is that all isolationism ideology idea could have been not applicable and actually gone to war. But if we've immediately gone to war, that doesn't set the standard for who we are as well. Because typically there has to be an aggressor of extreme force to bring on that type of policy to go to war.
Right.
And with Japan, all it took was a battleship from the United States to open up its borders. They
I mean,
literally
yeah,
gunboat diplomacy.
yeah. I mean, after a while, I think that many nations also kind of realize that isolating yourself and kind of
Hmm.
keeping the rest of the world out, it makes you weaker rather than making you stronger. If you don't know what your
Oh yeah.
opponents are doing, and if you're not developing with the rest of the world and you're only comparing things to yourselves, you're gonna fall behind and you're gonna find yourself caught off guard.
Yeah.
I think Japan learned that uh very organically on their own. But I totally get what you mean. Yeah.
And China, it took, I think, what it took the trade of opium to cause wars over opium, and as a
Hmm.
result, the opium wars actually made China so weak that it opened its borders. So the Western Hemisphere actually had more power in trade, and China wasn't dictating where they can go anymore.
Well, the introduction of drugs into a country to like destabilize it and weaken it, um, that's been used time and time again. We've even seen it in the US and in like neighborhoods and societies,
Yep.
like with the crack pandemic and the war on drugs, using that to add like almost essentially a big distraction and make the people be unable to focus on the real looming threat.
Yep.
Uh, it's very smart. It's very evil, but it's effective, and we've seen the
Oh, yeah.
changes that it's caused. Yeah.
And now this change for the better is good. It happens, but it's a slow change. And one thing that is not necessarily a slow change is one country's own identity, own culture, like Japan, for example. They are a very modest country, very pacifist, not really conservative of beliefs. They don't want to necessarily offend someone or act in a particular manner that will bring dishonor to the family.
hmm
What's your thought on that?
I mean, it's not just modesty, but also traditionalism.
Yep.
Um, with being a kind of a homogeneous society, they
Yeah.
have to create their own caste system. So from education to where you live in neighborhood, how you speak with your dialect, because not everyone in Japan speaks the same form of Japanese. And
Yep.
then from job to money to family status, all of
Oh
those
yeah.
are how they tell each other apart and how they differentiate. Oh my God, how they show that they are different from one another, which is completely different from how we have here in Western culture, where we focus on individualism
Yep.
because it's easier to motivate Western cultures by saying, don't you want to be your best self for you and aren't you your own main character? While in Eastern cultures or cultures
Mhm.
that focus more so on society, it's
Yeah.
how are you contributing to the bigger picture? How are you going to make the world better for the people who come after you? And those two different ways motivate countries differently.
Well, also homogeneous society also pushes naturalism more than anything else because you're acting in a similar manner and you want to be the same ish to other people that they perceive you
hmm
similar as anyone else. That kind of builds up the pride in the country and how who you are. You want to represent. You want to be distinct and be like on your p's and q's to provide much as you can because it's another aspect of Japanese society is business. They don't pay overtime. You stay as long as you need to finish the job. You're basically serving the company. You're not serving the individual. So your work should be finished before you leave for the day. And I think
Yeah.
lunch breaks are not necessarily a thing either. And that's why it's a mandatory law in Sunday as a mandatory rest day in Japanese society.
Well, the Japanese work culture and the way that they see themselves is still it's a
Yeah.
total difference of culture from what you will have here in the US or what you will see in Europe. Um
Oh yeah,
it's
and business
yeah.
cards is the best form of cultural exchange that you can do as an American business with a Japanese representative because they
hmm
take really good pride in having your contact because they secure that contact as a bridge of trust.
Well, yeah,
There's
because in
a
Japan
handshake American society, it's the business card. The exchange of the business card is so vital because it provides the point of contact, but also establishes the relationship.
yeah, because typically if you have someone's business card in Japan, that means an actual relationship has somehow been formed or at
Yep.
least a connection has been made. You don't hand your business card out to everyone. While here in
Yeah.
the US, it's very typical to like even with the conventions we have to just hand out business cards. If you go to a place where they're having a hiring fair, a job fair, you can go in there and get 1,000 business cards, and a lot of them you never use or you never contact those people. I think more of my older friends still use business cards, and then working professionals that I know, if they're out and about and they might socialize with someone that they're interested in, they use
Oh
just
yeah.
like Japanese culture and give that person their business card. But I've had many a times where I've been caught off guard when someone's like, "Oh, here's my business card. Do you like have yours?" And I'm like, "This is a Hooters. No, I do not have a business card." But in Japan, it's very, very normal.
Oh
And
yeah.
and the
I
way that you
yeah.
structure your mind is completely different.
Yeah, that's what I did when I was at a convention. Instead of a business card, because I didn't have the money for it, instead I created a QR code. So I gave a website. I gave all basically they can okay. Here's a QR code that you can scan. You can put it on your phone, and then bam, you bring it up, and then you can have it, and then you can use it what you want, like it, all that stuff. Direct you to the Facebook page, like the Facebook page. If you want to go back, you can do it that way. And I also had the written links down. There was also free advertising because I believe I was advertising for not only the blog at the time, but I was also advertising for a smaller convention in my hometown that my anime club was organizing. So I was doing two different birds with two different stones. So yeah, the QR code is like the business card, since I didn't have money to invest in a QR business cards at the last moment.
Hmm.
I
Yeah.
mean, look,
No, go
American
ahead.
society is so weird because they like QR codes more than business cards. Literally, if you give someone a QR code, they're more excited to scan the QR code. I've never
Well,
seen it.
QR codes, they made a comeback during the pandemic.
Yeah,
Beforehand, beforehand they were kind of like fun, almost gimmicky things that I saw like you would see businesses do, or you like they had a spike in popularity because Banksy the artist would use he would have like a QR code on some of his artwork. And then
yeah,
artists started adding QR codes to all of their art, especially in my city. Almost every wall art had a QR code.
yeah,
Um, but in regards to being used for a business purpose, I've only seen it come back in full swing because of the pandemic that we've had happen. Like people going into restaurants and having hand free, like having hand free options for devices and menus.
yeah. Which convenience sells. Unfortunately, that's just how society is. If the more convenient, the better it is. Uh, and I also think Japanese society they want convenience, but they also want quality over. Basically, they don't want to sacrifice quality over convenience as well.
They don't want to sacrifice what now over
They don't want
convenience.
to sacrifice the quality for convenience. They
That's
want it
very
to be
true.
they want it to be in very top shape because the pride. It's just it's how the individual of the company comes to be.
Yeah, it's interesting because I would say like in Japan when we look at and when you talk about convenience and quality, it's a great way to think about even their convenience stores that they have. The
Yeah,
convenience stores in Japan have everything that you need outside of like fruit being cheap. Things are affordable, they're easy to use, they're easy to access, and they're actually quality stuff that's delivered fresh every day. While here in Western culture, like especially the US, if you go to a grocery store, you're gonna get fresh stuff. But if you go to a convenience store, you go to a 7-Eleven, a racetrack, you're knowing that whatever you get is not healthy, even if it's an apple. You know that it's completely unhealthy and you're just accepting of that. But you've got to get something to just make it to your next destination.
yeah. That's why I like shopping at Dollar Tree or Dollar General. Feels like more like a grocery store than a convenience store.
Very, very true.
But
Um,
back to the topic at hand. I guess we're still on topic. You were just talking about Japan. Um,
mhm.
Modesty. What are some values of modesty that we see in Japanese society?
Well, honestly, I would say that one of the best ways to kind of define it when it comes to Japanese culture is that um, you'll see like during the daytime and the working time, people aren't dressing in bright colors. People aren't purposely standing out. It every time you see anything that's an anime that has to do with a person who stands out, it's usually they have a punk fashion to them. They are an idol or they're like the main character of the show. Or, unfortunately, you're in the Yu-Gi-Oh universe, and you just gotta just accept whatever somebody looks like, no matter the hairstyle, whatever. But in Japanese culture, it's very rude to make yourself uh the center of attention into peacock because they believe that uh I forgot what the saying
Faith.
is, but essentially it means that the
Yeah.
fruit that has
Devotion.
the most worth, yeah, is closer to the ground. It's not standing out. It bears the most weight and it's the most fruitful because it's not trying to be at the very top of the tree, be showing off. It's
Oh yeah.
focused on what its job is, and it completes that 100%, and that comes with their teachings and their
Oh
traditional
yeah.
way of living.
Because they have the important belief of face. You can either there's three things with face. You can give them face, you can make someone lose face, and build face. So one way to make someone lose face, for example, is do something that's unexpected, that's not the normal thing. And it brings out the negative attention, like wearing bright colors, like
Hmm.
embarrassing yourself, like showing emotional outbursts. That brings on negative attention, or let's say unusual attention to you. Because Japanese society is to blend in and not create a distinct uh, culture in public, but a distinct culture in private. Because they're very private individuals as well.
Yes, very much so. Um,
The
in
point of self esteem is really important here too with face.
I will have to say with when it comes to um like the value of face and keeping your composure and also keeping your privacy, that it doesn't just stop with oneself. In Japanese culture now, they're not just thinking of themselves when they make these decisions. It's ingrained in them that what they're doing is literally going to be a reflection of their family and also a reflection of their jobs and of the people that they're around. So if you interact with someone who stands out negatively in society, it's likely that you're going to remove yourself from that person's social circle in order to remain almost in this kind of like pure light that
Yeah.
you've been building around yourself and that the rest of society has been promoting.
Oh yeah. You act with restraint and so much conservative conduct that it's the normal thing to do. You don't want to stand out, risk losing face by something inappropriate. It's the fear of letting down the family is really impactful here. Because when we come back to it, uh, the family values that Japan has is, not necessarily to themselves, but they take family more seriously. Just like here's an example: Hispanic families really treasure family time and family bonds. So that's one culture where the idea of family is very close, very unique, very united. You do anything for your family, stuff like that.
Well, I wouldn't say that for Western culture, especially for American
No,
culture,
no.
that they care less about their family. But I
I
think
think
the way that we
family
perceive
is
ourselves,
yeah.
yeah, the perception I think of American individualism
Yeah.
isn't a straight road just to being a reflection of your family. unless
Yeah.
of course you're doing something extreme or kind of wild. Like over here, we many young adults are into the mindset where they've stopped basing all of their decisions on, oh, would this upset my parents? And more so like, is this going to be the thing that severs me from my family? If it is, then they take more time to think it over and think about the actions that they're taking. But if it's not, most people are starting to live for themselves more than
Mhm.
what they were doing in the past. And so it's been good for some people and it's not been so great for others. But I don't
Oh
think
yeah.
that relates to the fact that they don't care about their family. It's just
No,
how
it's not
different
the lack
cultures
of
represent it.
caring. It's
Yeah.
the like. Okay, here's one. Here's like a father, a husband, a worker, a taxi driver, um, a brother, a nephew. All those different hats that someone can have. You really come down to it. All have individual roles that they have in their life. Some are more important than others, like the
Mm-hmm.
taxi driver, the worker, the father, the husband, the son. All of that is in one combination of everyday life. Now, the other aspects, like the nephew, doesn't come up as much, but still has a chunk of the life dedicated to it. So,
Right.
individualism takes all those roles, and basically, instead of it all being divided, instead of being all one thing, it's divided into several smaller chunks. Japan takes it not necessarily as an individual. They basically treat family, work, and everything else the same. So everything is basically every small detail is a significant part of daily life. You
No,
treat it with the same consideration. You treat it with similar consideration, and everything you do can has an action associated.
which no, you're completely on point of how that is in that culture. But I do find it interesting though that in a lot of animes that people know and love, and even shows that we find as our own
Mm-hmm.
special gems and our own comfort stuff, there is an ongoing trend of when the hero kind of or the protagonist does something that is completely against what the family wants or what they expected of them. They choose like a path where most of their family or maybe the town they grew up in is
Yeah.
saying, "Don't do it, don't go, stay here," and they go off and they go to accomplish whatever big mission it is, and they kind of pick up a merry band of friends who support them in their endeavors or try to keep them on track along the way. So I do think that's very interesting as well. That for a country that is very modest and does care about their privacy and cares about family lineage and maintaining their honor, that they
Yeah.
do also love shows where people are just like completely just like forget it.
Yeah.
I want to do this thing, and even though everyone's saying no or saying that it's going to ruin all of these aspects,
Mm-hmm.
I'm still going for it, and people love that. It
Yeah.
makes some of the best heroes. It
Oh
makes
yeah.
some of the greatest heroes.
And the thing with Japanese society I like a lot is the landscape. The different landscapes, the different cultures. You can still be a small town or a small village, remain traditional, and still be unique in your culture. You just you're presenting your culture what your village is, and Japan at the same time.
Right.
So, like for example, if Japan has a when they're very strategic when they place out shops or they use this piece of land for a coffee shop, for example, or a net cafe. They're very specific on what they're going to use it for, and they also leave enough space, the green space, where you plant, you have a garden, you have the a way to enjoy nature in the middle of town, like how akin to New York City has New York State Park, or Central Park. I mean, they have Central Park as a big green space, but Japan has very individual green spaces and dedicate a lot of time to it. Like I know,
Mhm.
like America, we pride ourselves with community gardens. Well, in Japan, it's everyday courtesy to have that spaces incorporated in your city design anyway.
Well, they also have limited space. I think
Yes.
we also have to remember that they're an island, so they don't they do have rural areas. They do have like forestation, and they have country regions and all of that in provinces, but they don't have the amount of the land that we have, and one of our
Yeah.
states is the size of their country. So I think I think that's just a stroke, like a structural and infrastructure
Yeah.
thing that's done. Like their architecture is to utilize as much space positively as possible, because you
And
can't
not
have just
leave
a
a negative
concrete
footprint.
jungle. Yeah,
Yeah.
you can't just have a concrete jungle for your biggest city and then
Yeah.
um, expect everyone to just be fine and for the human psychology to just work okay with that. But I
Yeah.
will say that in like a really very popular genre again is slice of life. And like
Mhm.
even all the shows for slice life, whether it be romantic,
Yeah.
dramatic,
Cherry
comedy,
blossom,
fantasy, yeah,
sakura.
like
Hmm.
Fruit Basket, all of that. These shows, Saki Kai.
Yeah. So I think it's really significant with uh, the different green spaces creating different. Also, not only is it structuring society, but also giving shape to the society as well. And the school system is reflecting of that, of the school festivals, the different the rooftop scene, the beach scene, going to the station, all that stuff. What do you think?
Um, I do know that when I watch the shows, I do like the it's still a duality to it there because it has the traditional things that are happening, and that kind of
Hmm.
gives you an insight of just how the culture is set up. But them having these fun kind of like what
Yeah.
we call filler episodes, which they are in regards to some plot lines, but I really enjoy them. I do like it when they slow it down and they kind of just let
Hmm.
kids and enjoy their life, or they just have one
Yeah.
themed episode for the school festival. I think since those are staples in anime as well, it holds very true that these are very important aspects in a developing like young adults life in Japan. Like these are very big moments that people love to recreate over and over because once you become an adult, it's very hard to find
Yeah,
time
you're
for the
not as
whimsical stuff.
magical. You don't have the time for it, and not having the time, you basically get in rant about, well, where am I going to be in another 10 years? I'm going to be stuck here when I'm not really happy and job satisfaction, yada yada yada. Or are you going to be, well, I'm only 16. I got the world ahead of me on all my shoulders.
And you know what? I will have to say that those 16-year-olds really do have the world on their shoulders, but I think that's because what it feels like when you're that age. I remember when I was 16 and you feel like the world will end, or like there's no, what is the future? Who cares about 21? You're 16. That's 5 years.
Yeah,
It's like you have to think about it. It's like you've lived what a quarter of your life by the time you're 16. So much is a part of being 16 and going through your teenage years. So I do love that kind of when you're in your youth,
yeah.
they show that in Japanese anime, just
Um,
how maddening it can
I mean,
be.
what keeps me
With
sane is just
throwing
to
everything
live
on
day
your
by
back.
day.
Yeah.
That's I just focus on the moment. I can't believe we're gonna say this, but you you basically live moment by moment, and by living by moment, you tend to appreciate life more. And yes, this is coming from another person, Mr. Dr. Bob Rich. He's still in my mind. Anyway, Yeah, I'm telling you, all these interview guests are
Oh
just
my goodness.
overlapping and just affecting my psyche in a really strange but beneficial way.
At this point, you live, breathe, and sleep this podcast in all of your interviews. It is very impressive. Every time you tell me that your schedule of what you have lined up, I'm just like, mm. Not enough coffee. There's no way, but you pull it off week after week. I have to commend you. You are your own anime protagonist. Yeah,
Oh gosh.
you keep rolling with the
And at
punches.
least I don't have to do the exam, the exam arc or the not the exam arc opposed to the tournament arc that we see sometimes.
Very true. I do like that. I do love the either you get an exam arc or you get a tournament arc or you just
Yeah.
get like some random challenge that we're just waiting for.
Oh, oh god.
Absolutely
It's
ridiculous.
even worse than Slice of
Absolutely
Life.
ridiculous.
And also Adventure School Anime. Oh, it's such a nail biter for that content. Flippin' broke. No Hero. No, My Hero Academia has everything I just said. The exam arc, the villain arc, the tournament arc. I was like, brah. Then the summer break arc. I was like, oh my gosh, why can't this just be something totally separate than Spice of Life? Uh,
Mm. The fact that you're over here begging for slice of life for My Hero Academia is hilarious because when I watched it with my guy, we watched it and when they had the like this isn't a spoiler, anyone. They finally give these kids like a youthful moment where they
yeah,
do like a
I love
school
that.
like
That was actually
festival thing,
the
like every school
best
festival, but
break.
it's My Hero Academia style. Yeah, yeah, no, but for me, I got upset because I was like, season ending. How dare you let them know peace? Because every season
Oh my
ending,
god.
somebody's in danger. Someone just got like incapacitated. Somebody's brother's in the hospital. It's always like something's happening, right? And then they gave us one season where the good guys win. They do like a dance concert performance and they're having a great time. Their school has so much
Gosh.
money. Like we could talk about that later. But it literally when that episode was done and they were like, "We'll see you next season." And I was like, "Are you freaking kidding me?
It's
We
it's
got
a
to get back in this
it's a
into the
not a
grime of it
theory. It's
all."
a game theory. Oh my god.
Please, for the life of me, why who brings Matt Pat in
Oh my
unprovoked?
gosh. That that's
Brings
hilarious.
Matt Pat. It's just sweet, sweet early
He's still
2000s
on
YouTube. My God.
he's still going
I'm
on with
going back to the
food theory right now.
2010s.
And game theory and film theory.
He's, yes, game
Yeah.
theory. He does
He's
all
still doing it.
three. And honestly, I'm proud of him.
Oh
He's kept
gosh. I still
that
remember
channel
how
solid.
SEO is the most expensive video game ever that's not even made. Oh my gosh. Oh, Sword Art Online will cost over $1 billion to make because of the different 100 individual floors and each landscape on each floor and the bit frame that is required for it. I was like,
Okay, you're sitting here, you're sitting here talking all this trash, but imagine how awesome it would have been to have a Sword Art Online version of like that in our world while we
oh,
all were like locked down in quarantine and stuff. Like imagine how like we wouldn't do anything. We would
uh,
be fat like the humans off of Wally for sure,
I'm
but
not,
we
I'm
would
not
be in
trashing
living
it.
our best lives,
I
trashing
just
the
saw how
universe.
expensive it was. It's like, oh my gosh, what is this? It was just an information overload with with Matt Pat. Okay, it's only a 10-minute video. It's only a 10-minute video, and you
He
just
that
crash everything in. It's literally crash course. Oh my
that man
gosh!
lived his
Have
life
you ever
in
had
fast
crash
forward. It's
course?
very impressive. Lives it in
Crash
fast forward.
course. and he's just
What's
going
that?
on about Crash Course. Okay,
No,
Crash Course,
no.
which they say, oh, we're going to study the Civil War. Well, here's my take on the Civil War, and then speed one 5 minutes later, he's still talking. He's notorious for like just speed talking all the way. He turns like a 30-minute lesson to like a 15-minute segment. It's like, what is this? That was the bane of my school history program. They just kept going with the crash course.
Um, I vote against that. I don't.
Oh,
That's a
yeah.
lot. That is
Yeah, so it's
absolutely a
like
lot.
we had to
Oh my
answer
god.
questions too. It's like, okay, that that's try to write something that's good about from the video. But yeah, uh, I think stuff like that as a really different medium. I also think back, with anime wise, it's also really good for the Japanese society. Like content creators make all kinds of original content. One community is VTuber, which I think is interesting. They, have a virtual avatar and it's simulating movement through a AI program that's recognizing body movement. I'm kind of sure. I'm not sure about that, but yeah. What's your thoughts about VTubing and the dual message that we want to achieve?
Um, I at first didn't really understand what VTubing was. Like, I had seen it pop up a lot on message
Mhm.
boards. Reddit was talking about it, and at first I thought it was kind of like almost like a like bit emojis or IMVU stuff like that, where you're kind of creating your own avatar. But it, I'm okay with it. Like, I just think it's just another like evolution for like the mixture of technology and people's love for like
Yeah.
culture and anime and all of that. So it's it's not something that I would do. Like, I don't know if I would bother making my own VTuber channel or anything like that, but I do like the amount of effort that it takes
Oh
for
yeah.
people to kind
And,
of build up these communities
oh
and
yeah.
also be do the dedication to like have the software, the devices, the syncing of everything. It's
Yeah.
really cool. I will give them that.
Once you have a country rich in culture, the medium really becomes so diverse that you have an entire lifetime of anime to watch and never be able to watch it all. And the culture exchange is really high. You can track it back to the 20th century, period exploration, maturity, refinement, animation's development into something that's changed, basically industry in Japan. It's a model for the full national and cultural experience that we see in anime culture. So, Japan
Hmm.
as open and closed culture. What is your view on that?
I think it's wrong to imagine that Japanese people are very quiet or they're only hardworking and reserved. I think knowing the amount of amazing talent that they produce and their diligence to their work, it is very cool to see it come out in creative ways. I think it also is kind of like it kind of always reminds me of like the quiet kid in class who has some like incredible, insane like hobby behind the scenes. You just don't know about it. That's how I think whenever it's like people say, Japanese people are quiet or reserved or they're very, peaceful country and stuff, but
Oh
there's
yeah,
so much rich
there's so much,
culture in there.
that you
Um,
miss if
and
you
it
don't
comes out through
observe it
their artwork.
specifically what it is at face value. At face value,
Yeah.
Japan is so what Japan is Japan. The saying what stays in Vegas stays in Vegas. Well, with Japan, it does not stay in Japan. When they bring out the anime and export it to the States and all these countries, they're creating their unique profile in the digital space. And that is beyond our comprehension because that digital space is very important to protecting Japanese culture.
Yeah. It's it's very easy to get immersed in it, but it's also very easy to miss a lot of things. I think if you get very wrapped up in the technology and the modernism of what they have now and their the more flashier art forms that you see, like with VTubers, with their idol groups and their concerts and their visual shows, you can miss some of the amazing things like their villages, their shrines, their temples, their traditional dances and their music, um, even tea pouring classes and learning about geishas, samurais, all of that. There's so much. It's so much, and it's
Yeah.
so much condensed into one country that is only a small portion of like the land and size of
Oh
our
yeah,
country,
and
but
also
there's so much in it.
uh, the pride of sharing such culture is very reminiscent of the fact that its natural spirit, the values and distinct characteristics. You know, what do you think of the natural spirit being involved in the process of
Yeah.
this animation process?
I think you need it. I think you need to have something that is a central foundation and something that is that
Mhm.
everyone can say I have this thing and it's for me and it's unique to me, but every single one of us has one, almost like a soul,
Yeah.
and your own ambition and motivation. I think having that's the strongest foundation you can
Oh
have, and
yeah,
then you can only continue to build around it. As long as your
yeah.
foundation is strong, you can create anything. And I think
I think
Japan and its
it
people has
really
shown that
creates
time and time again.
collectivism a lot of times because all of it is the collective together. And
Oh. Mhm.
when you approach that, you kind of get it. Well, I mean, anime, that's our culture. But this shrine down the street is also our culture. This train going to Kanto and connecting to Johto is the same thing. You know, uh, not Johto, stupid Pokemon. God, Nagasaki to Kanto. You know, all those different transport
Oh
loops
no.
that the train takes you is very
Yes.
reminiscent of the fact too that each sector of Japan is very accessible to the public, so they can go out the way to view it because they have this interconnected transportation system that is really easy to use because it's just an island. I mean, it might take a few hours depending where you're going, if you go to the north or south or the middle, but it's still within a day trip. While United States, good luck trying to get to California from, I don't know, New York. It's a half a day trip. On an airplane,
Half a day trip. Yeah, that's
but
just for
driving over
flying.
there, it's a half a day trip just to
Yeah,
get
that's just
from New
for
York to
flying.
Florida.
Yes, and I mean,
Actually, no, it's not
if
a half
we
a day trip.
could
It's like
in this
more
country
than
kind
half
of
a day,
conceptualize the
almost
idea
a
that,
day.
yeah, if every state was its own country, yeah, it's just a lot. It's a lot. But um yes, it is very true. To be able to access all of your country within a train's ride, um, or if you want to take a flight or a boat, being able to do so is an amazing idea and thought. Um, I think it is a bit hard for us to think about because there's just so much land
Can't.
and so much to cover,
Uh,
and but it doesn't minimalize.
I
Yeah,
can't believe I
it
said
doesn't
Kanto
minimize
to
their stuff at
Johto.
all.
I mean, I'm right, but like uh, that's not the connection that we need to make.
Not you being like, I mean, I'm
Yeah,
still right,
it's
but
oh
anyway,
gosh.
we'll edit it and post.
That's
We'll
gonna
mark it
be
and
in there
edit it and
anyway.
post.
You know,
Oh my
gosh.
goodness.
You know, the hero doesn't rely on its own strength, but cooperates with the partners in the team to win. So, as long as I have other people to help me along the way, hey, I can be very successful. What do you think?
I think you sound like an anime protagonist about to go on a really, really big adventure. And I'm going to be
Oh
your
my
auntie
god.
slash mom slash neighbor who raised you from childhood and tell you, why don't you just stay in town? But I believe in you. I always knew you'd be great. And one day
And
you'd
then,
leave this small town. They always say that. They always say that.
and then
I
I
always
come
knew
back and
you'd
you tell
leave.
me a big
It's
feast
like,
and I'm
wow,
off on
lady.
the road again. Yeehaw.
Literally
Oh yeah.
the very next day, I go into town. I do two things.
Yeah.
Hunter x Hunter was sick for that. That was
Oh.
Hunter x Hunter was terrible for that. He came home, ate some food, and then was just like, I gotta go
Oh
find
my
my
god.
father. He told me not to find him. So later, auntie.
Bye. You're very vital. Or I just love how. Oh gosh, I'm going back to Pokemon, but just Ash's mom comes in with Mr. Mime, Mime, and they just fix the dinner, and he's off on the road again. Like, when does this ever stop? Like, come on.
I mean, for people who like love their children but also love their free time, this is great. Who knows what his mom's doing in her free time without him being home? She's probably aggravated when he comes home. Ash, get out of
I mean,
here.
she's so carefree. I was like, ugh. Like, come on, have some depth to you. I mean, you, Anyway, you know, it's national culture is rooted in their hearts. Since childhood, people have received the collective is education, the influence of the collectivism a long time is deeply implanted, so they apply the spirit to the future study, work, and life. What do you think about that aspect?
I mean, that was a lot of words. But
Hmm.
I guess as a whole, again, having one people you can rely on and also having something to continue
Yeah.
building off of, it's always going to make for a better foundation and better motivation. But
Hmm.
I guess probably doing it just for yourself, or just for very selfish reasons. So having that instilled within you, or
Yeah.
if you learn it along the way,
Oh yeah.
it's always going to be a good thing. Unless you're a little too selfless,
Mhm.
or a little too willing to always jump into other things,
Yeah,
you
and
can get off course very
one
quickly.
such symbolism is the cherry blossom. They bloom. They're very beautiful. They bloom only for a very short amount of time,
Mhm.
and this actually is a form of the action associated with collectivism because cherry blossoms represent the growth of life needed, but also the let going of that life after they stop blooming to go back to normal.
Almost kind of me a bit of our death
Yes.
and rebirth episode. Kind of like this circular motion, this circular kind of pattern that happens. So starting,
Oh yeah.
coming, going, and knowing when to stop
Because
is very
the
interesting.
short
Yeah.
season of the blossoms coincide the short passing of that time of year, but also the returning of the time without
Hmm.
the blossoms as well. Because you see that a lot of times in anime. The blossoms are very reminiscent of the fact of taking a moment to think and admire the beauty, and then the in the school setting they end, and whatever that moment is stronger because it's so short.
Yeah, I mean, I think it also reflects as I would say youthfulness, our adolescent years, and then also love. And a lot of times it does represent either
Hmm.
like a forlorn type of love, a love that's been lost,
Yes, I love unrequited love.
unrequited love as
Oh,
well. The yeah, and then even with death and passing, while there is the flower death that's in Japan, the red one that we see a lot in animes, especially like at the end of Demon Slayer or in the credits of Inuyasha. But for the I would say for the Sakura blossoms, those are probably the
yeah,
ones that you see most often used. And it's because those moments are very cherished, and people look they're so forward. The festivals for it and everything. Watching them bloom and knowing that it's not something you can have every single day. So when you get it, you
yeah.
need to hold on to it for as long as you can. And when it's time to let it
Oh,
go,
yeah.
you allow it to be. And knowing that natural process, I
Oh,
think
yeah.
makes you
And
a more
also with the
well-rounded person.
duality action of modesty and anime, we also dive into what is culture. Is culture necessarily have principles that we always abide by, or is there an exception that's still within our own culture? A lot of times, this is a story when uh, people of dual, like let's say, either dual citizenship or a family culture that's in a different country, but they're in a home country. How do you apply your family's culture to the culture you live in?
I mean, it's
Yeah, yeah,
possible to
yeah.
do
It's
it. You
possible.
see
It
it a
happens
lot.
all
I
the
mean,
time.
I do believe that
But with also
more recent
that,
shows,
I
yeah.
also feel like
Um,
um, accepting one's culture, the one you come from, it's important to consider, and the one you're at currently is also good to take some notes to put in action to combine the two. Because a lot of people think that, oh, your family culture is defined. Well, culture is not necessarily, culture is a nuance that is always growing, always becoming new, becoming more, but also becoming less because of certain outcomes of traditional lentitudes declining because participation is not high enough.
um, yeah, I guess I can see that. I mean, I feel like that's more of a um like a anthropology kind of perspective when reviewing cultures as a whole. But also I think that again it can still tie
Yeah,
into the sakura blossom theme that you were speaking of, and its meaning, because there are gonna be a time when you have to let go of a culture, whether it be because of the continuation of its practices is dying out, or if its people have kind of been thinned out in regards to, you know, their region, their country, whether a war, anything of that nature. So there's a lot of factors that absolutely can, I would say, like dilute a culture that you have. And a lot of times things also get blended together and morph and change. And
yeah,
we see that a lot in this country. We're
yeah.
literally called the melting pot for that
And
reason.
I always like to have like sometimes how Japanese society can make fun of American society or take something of that society, make it their own, and then it's becoming in their own culture as well. Because just as we take from other cultures, Japan is constantly take evolving its own culture. The next decade might be something new that we don't even know
Hmm.
because it hasn't been adopted in their culture yet. Because their culture is still changing. You know, the traditional side's still there, but there's still so many things that they have to consider. It just makes you wonder what would the culture look like from a century from now compared to now.
I mean, I
Yeah,
still feel as though Japan's
absolutely.
going to keep their the traditional portions of it. It's not. I don't see it
Yeah,
being something that's going to get kind of wiped away
it's not
or
peekaboo
minimized.
and close your again, close your
And
eyes.
I
It's
yeah,
more like uh, it's the nuance carrying over because it's been carrying over for centuries. They've just been growing and growing. Now they're just in a digital age. They can share their culture in a widespread audience, applicable to the public to see. They always had it. I don't think they never went away with it, which I
right.
think is really great of Japan and China. All these different Asian countries kind of keep their culture intact. They don't let it. They don't let the wildfire come in and destroy everything. They let the wildfire in, and the culture still burns brightly even after the fire.
It's a persevering nation. That's literally what Japan is known for. So I don't ever believe that they're just going to kind of roll over and give up on their culture. I think if anything, they'll continue to adapt, but they'll keep those things that are rooted in who their
Oh,
nation is
absolutely. And
continuously.
to me, I feel if you have a culture, regardless of what it comes from, what it is, try adapting it to your life. You don't know what the result until you do. It's really symbolic to have a culture you can call your own and be immersed in the subtlety and the capacity to grow. That's what I want people to take from this episode. How about you?
I want people to be able to
Hmm.
recognize the similarities that you can find from the artwork and artistry that comes from anime and its storytelling with the people of Japan. And then also look at how those changes have come over the years, how we had the whole conversation about the change in artistic styles and drawing
Yeah.
styles for animation. You can also see that within storytelling as well. So seeing how as the times have changed and the influences that um, socializing and interacting with the global world, how that's impacted Japanese culture and how that's reflected in their artwork, and really enjoy those two, conflicting nuances of traditionalism
Yeah.
and modesty with the vibrant, explosive
Oh, yeah,
creativity that's in
absolutely.
their
The
stories. So yeah,
creative nature that we have, that we see, will always continue to strive and succeed because it's what is unique to Japan. It's what unique that Japan can bring to the world in the global stage of that particular entertainment. They're going to be the front runners for a very long time. I don't necessarily see. I see competitors in the market, but I still see Japan very strong in going forward. So that is the conclusion of this
I
episode.
absolutely agree.
Um, and this is the conclusion of Japanese duality, modesty, and anime. We might do more duality type episodes, but keep in
Thank you
mind
guys for joining.
that you have your own culture and no one can take it from you.
Absolutely. Thank you guys for joining us this week and join us next week for another riveting topic in regards to all things anime
Oh
and
gosh,
Japanese
I did not
culture.
expect this topic today. This is a last minute type of thing, but hey, it worked out and we are all able to persevere, just like the fire. Bye, guys.
Absolutely. Bye, guys.
This concludes another episode of MC Anime Podcast. MC Anime Podcast is available on podcast directories like Google Podcast, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and YouTube. We also have our website at mcanimepodcast.com. If you want to directly support us, then follow Patreon blog MC Anime. Finally, if you want services for hire, then we're available on Fiverr for audio and video production, graphic design, idea consulting, and blog and article writing.